and I will give all of them the chance to introduce themselves. Then we go into the reason why they are here. We start from you, sir.
Thank you very much for having us. I am Air Commodore David Akron, the Deputy Commandant of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center.
My name is Dr. Kweku Danso. I serve as the Acting Dean at the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center.
Okay, thank you. My name is Benjamin Serebo. I'm the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator for the Danish Gulf of Guinea Maritime Security Program, but then I'm attached to the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center.
Okay, welcome, and I'm sure one voice you might not just hear. She's in the background, Aisha Nkrumah, the Senior Communications Officer of the institution. She's also here with us. But you are here in Liberia. You are here for a very, very important reason. That is the launch of a code of practice for women in the maritime security domain. But before we get to the launch, I want to know, or many of our listeners will want to know about the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center. So can you take some time out and tell the public what do you do?
Thank you very much. The Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center is a Ghana Ministry of Defense establishment, which was established in 1998 and commissioned in 2004. And the purpose was to build upon and share Ghana's 5 decades of internationally acclaimed experience and competency in peace operations with other states in the ECOWAS sub-region and the rest of Africa.
Okay.
This was also in recognition of the need for training military, police, civilian men and women to meet the changing demands of multidimensional peace operations. As you may be aware, the center is one of the 3 peacekeeping training centers of excellence mandated by the ECOWAS to offer training in peacekeeping and peace support operations in Africa. The centers, as it stands now, delivers training courses in 3 main thematic areas: peace support operations, conflict management, peace and security studies, and also runs master's and PhD programs in same. The Kofi Annan International Peace Training Center has a worldwide class research department that undertakes research in thematic areas. And it's one of these research that has brought us here in Liberia to launch the code of conduct for women in peacekeeping, women in the maritime domain.
Okay.
So, till date, as we stand today, the time of its establishment, we have been able to train over 31,000 people, both police, military, civilians, men and women. If you have more time, I'll be giving you a breakdown of even how many female have even been trained on this.
Okay.
But just briefly, so that we can go into the main purpose for our visit to your studio here.
Okay.
So basically, that is what we do. The center is one of the 3 institutions designated by the ECOWAS as a regional center of excellence for the delivery of training research in the areas of conflict prevention and peace building. There are several courses that we are running, and in recent times, we have even introduced some online, which means that even as you sit here today, you can plug into our website and you can take some courses. In other words, you don't always have to be in Accra, Ghana, to undertake some of the courses. And where there's a need, then you may have to come and do a top-up. Okay. But most of our courses are now going online. So that's basically, in short, what you do. of my colleagues who want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, Deputy, you have spoken to the areas that are the focus of our main operations. So he's spoken about training, research, policy support, engagement.
Okay.
And the reason we are in Monrovia this week basically has to do with the policy support that we continue to give or offer to stakeholders across the West African sub-region.
And I'm of no doubt that Liberia is not the first country, like the deputy commander said. But what inform your decision, to launch this program that you're about to launch tomorrow here in Liberia? Especially the maritime sector is the one that's going to benefit from this one.
So the code of practice for women in maritime security is an offshoot of a multi-pronged intervention that we have undertaken in the maritime domain over the last couple of years, specifically starting from 2018 thereabout. As you may recall, in 2018 and following that, there was an upsurge in maritime threats relating specifically to piracy, armed robbery at sea, and there were multiple reports on pirate attacks in the waters of the Gulf of Guinea. So there was the need to find lasting solution to the problem, which came in the form of direct intervention to halt such disruptions, but then also long-term interventions that focused on ways through which it is possible to prevent them from happening in the first instance. So one of the initiatives that the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping undertook was to conduct research, but also build the capacity of the stakeholders within the maritime domain, involving the Navy, Coast Guards, Marine Police, even civilian actors, and also civilian or civil society organizations, and so on and so forth. So from the training and the capacity interventions that we delivered, it became obvious that women were often neglected when it comes to the security sector to begin with, but also the maritime domain.
Okay.
If you take most of the frameworks that have been designed to address issues of maritime security, including the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, the ECOWAS Integrated Maritime Strategy, the African Union Integrated Maritime Strategy, you would notice that these frameworks are gender neutral in the sense that they do not prioritize women's concerns and issues when it comes to security. But it is the case that men and women experience insecurities differently, implying that the perspectives of women need to also be brought on board. It is also often taken for granted that disruptions and threats and criminality within the maritime domain are threats that are posed by men, and that women will normally not be involved in such criminality. But the fact of the matter is that there's a sense in which women also play a role in such activities, implying that for a comprehensive response to be delivered against this threat, then there's the need to take into account the role played by women, just as the perspective of men have always remained important. So this code basically then seeks to broaden the space to include women, to bring their perspectives to bear. And what the code does basically is to provide a guideline that institutions within the maritime domain can adopt to enhance the process of broadening women's participation, not only within the maritime sector, but then also within the security domain as a whole.
So, how many women do we expect, to form part of this entire process now that it will be launched tomorrow?
So tomorrow we are expecting a total of 50 participants from a number of institutions or stakeholders.
Security-related institutions first.
Security-related institutions, including the Liberian National Defense, including the Ministry of Immigration or the Department of Immigration, including the Ministry of Fisheries, the Liberian Maritime Authority, and other stakeholders that have all been invited, but whom we have also been working with over the last couple of years, for example, including the Liberian National Police.
Okay. All right. We come back to you, Doug, but I want to hear a little bit from the MAE guy to shed a little light on, the government of Denmark contribution to this entire maritime security issue, especially when it comes to the Gulf of Guinea.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much once again. So since 2015, the government of Denmark has implemented various interventions within the Gulf of Guinea region. The current program phase is the third phase. And then this phase specifically is aimed at enhancing response capacities to maritime security within the Gulf of Guinea region through improved capacities of maritime law enforcement agencies and personnel. So the current phase, we have 4 projects under this phase. And the project Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center is implementing, happens to be one of the interventions under the program. And so one of the programs is being implemented by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And then we have another one which is being implemented by Interpol. And then the Danish Defense Ministry is also implementing another project under the program. Now, the main purpose for the program is to enhance the entire criminal justice chain processes within the maritime security sector. Now, when you talk about the entire criminal justice chain, we are looking at maritime law enforcement agencies being able to detect crime at sea, interdict these maritime criminals, prosecution, and then also imprisonment in a human rights approved prison
take them
facilities.
on sea, bring them on, and leave them with the people who are dealing with all of the other processes. I'm sure that's how it works, right?
Exactly, that's how it works, and that's why one of the main aims of the program is to enhance collaboration and cooperation among the institutions within the maritime sector. Because, for instance, we know the Navy usually go to sea and they do the arrest. They need to collaborate with Marine Police, who usually lead the prosecution. And then we also need to train our judges, prosecutors, to understand the maritime sector. Because sometimes, if they don't understand the sector, then it becomes a challenge. So when you talk about the entire criminal chain, this is what we are doing. And Dr. Danso mentioned about also the ECOWAS Integrated Maritime Strategy. The strategy recommends building the capacity of journalists like yourself, so that you understand what transpires within the maritime sector, so that when you are reporting, you will know, how to go about your report. So we've also conducted training for journalists. In
so
the Gulf of Guinea.
Journalists will not be part of this one.
Definitely, we are having the public relation officers of these key institutions coming, and I believe journalists coming. So we've had this training, and then in September, October, we are coming to Liberia to organize the training for the journalists as well. So this is what Denmark government is doing over the years. And also let me mention about ship in the box. This project that we are doing, what we are doing is
ship in the box.
Yes, ship in the box. So it's like we've built this structure, which looks like a ship. We have one in Nigeria, and then which we launched in February, and then we are building another one in Ghana, which we are going to launch hopefully in June. So this ship-like structure which has been built is going to be used by security personnel, maritime law enforcement agencies from both the security and then the civilian, military and then civilian part, to use it for their training and exercises. Because usually we used to hire vessels to do this training, but then what the government of Denmark has done is to build this ship-like structure so that we can use it for the practical sessions of the visit, board, search, and seizure training that we do for both military and then civilian. And then to ensure sustainability, we are training some locals to become trainers, because currently the trainers which we use for the visit, board, search, and seizure training, they come from Sri Lanka because they have the expertise. Okay. But currently what we are doing is to train trainers, the local trainers from the sub-region, so that they will take over in the near future, so that they will be able to conduct the training. So basically, this is what the government of
and that's interesting to hear. Matter of fact, we have a very long coastline as well. It's important for our maritime sector. But I want to come back to the deputy commandant a little bit to tell us some of these countries, right, that have already benefited from this entire training, and what are they saying? What feedback are you getting based on this training? Are things improving when it comes to piracy prevention and all of that?
Thank you very much. The training is targeted, or the launching of this code of practice for women in the maritime domain is targeted at 7 countries. 7. Okay. From Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria.
All coastal countries.
And then you add Cameroon and then Congo, Brazzaville. Also, that's the countries bordering the Gulf of Guinea, where we have these challenges that was enumerated earlier by Dr. Danso. So far, we have visited, in fact, 2 weeks ago, I was in Cameroon, Yaoundé, where we had the first launch, followed by a launch in Congo, Brazzaville, specifically at Point Noir. And then at the same time we're launching that in Point Noir, it was also happening in Nigeria, because we're also working within a certain time frame so that we make sure that some of these things are covered at least by the middle of this year. So countries which are currently pending, tomorrow we'll be having the one for Liberia, and then subsequently there will be the one for Cote d'Ivoire and then Senegal. Okay. So those are still in the works. I must say that because of the earlier work done, as he has mentioned earlier, through the research as early as 2018, there was a little bit of consultation and consultative meetings, engagement with stakeholders. So it was through this broad consultation that led to the development of this code and therefore its subsequent launch. It's too early at this stage to see what is coming out of it. But one thing I can tell you for a fact is that it was warmly embraced. The participation, and you mentioned the media, the visibility we are even getting is because they are present. But more importantly, all the stakeholders within the maritime space and domain were all present with their representative at the functions. And it will interest you to know that even though the focus target is women, we encourage the men to come, because it's important that we, the men, also understand the challenges that our women are facing within this domain, so that we can together assist to make sure we have something that will address some of the welfare and challenges, and make sure that they are given fair opportunity to contribute their quota towards addressing the security challenges within the maritime domain.
So, following the launch on tomorrow, I'm thinking whether there is what's the duration of the entire training for the Liberian participants? Would it be like a month, 6 months? Is there a time frame attached to the training?
Okay, so the code is basically a framework or a guideline for integrating gender priorities into the operations of the security agencies and even non-security agencies that have a focus on the maritime space. So the project that my colleague spoke about come in different components. There's a capacity building project, for example, he spoke about training programs for journalists.
Okay.
But this code is just basically a framework that guide institutions.
Okay, so it's not something that you will say we have facilitators talking to these women about specific issues, but it's just something ongoing.
It's just a code that help institutions or that guide them in terms of how they can prioritize issues around gender and broadening of the space for women to also participate effectively and to harness the value and the potentials that they bring in order that matters that are of great importance or priority to women are also reflected not only in policies relating to maritime security, but even the operationalization of those policies. And I can give you a specific example. So, for example, my colleagues will tell you if you board a vessel, there are instances where the space within the vessel might accommodate 4 men, maybe in a cabin, right? And that would be okay for 4 men to occupy that space. But if you have a single woman, it becomes difficult for that woman to join the men and,
Share the space.
and share the space with them. And therefore, what we are trying to drive attention to is to begin to pay attention to the needs of women, even when we design vessels and so on and so forth. And that's just one example. There are multiple instances where I think the conclusion has been drawn that security is a domain for men, but we know that that is not really quite the case, because there are instances where you need nobody but women to be present. And if you don't have them, then delivering effective security is also challenged. And we are working as much as possible to help address that imbalance. And one of the approaches we are seeking to adopt is through the development of the code of practice.
And I'm thinking in terms of tracking. Yes, once this code is introduced, maybe months from now, how do you intend to track to ensure that it's gaining root in these various institutions?
So we want the stakeholders to own it. We want them to own it, because then ownership is critical to the sustainability of the practices and priorities that are outlined in the code. And therefore, what we seek to see happen in the next couple of years is, for example, if it were possible for the various institutions, organizations, or agencies to form some sort of grouping or steering committee to monitor how various organizations are integrating the practices that are outlined in the code, and therefore improving on the processes of gender inclusion and participation. And when I talk about gender inclusion, I'm not only talking about quantitative inclusions, but also qualitative inclusion in terms of how women are brought even to the most strategic level decision-making centers, so that they're able to contribute to policy.
And I'm concerned whether this code is unique to all of the 7 countries that the deputy spoke about. It's unique to.
Okay, so it's the same code. But what we have done, we want it to be as flexible as possible to take specific context into account. So we want the countries to be able to, or even the institution, to be able to adapt it. So we have used the KAIPTC as a case, as an example in terms of how they can adapt it. But because context matters, we want them to adapt it. They are not supposed to strictly go by what is stated, but to adapt it to their circumstances in ways that reflect the, even issues of cultural sensitivity and so on and so forth.
Okay. You want to add something?
Yes. So to add something to what Doc just said, at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, and then from the Danish Embassy also, monitoring and evaluation is a core aspect of all the work that we do. So what happens is that, for instance, when we implement a code like this, periodically, we will visit the countries where we launch this code to find out about how they've implemented whatever we have in the code. Because the feedback we get from them, from the practitioners, is what inform the things that we do. So usually what we do directly responds to their challenges, because we get the information from them to develop our intervention. So it goes for the code as well. After some time, we will visit the countries where we launched it, not only the code, but then other interventions that we've done, to assess how they are using the knowledge, to get their feedback, so that if we are developing another intervention, it will be based on emerging issues which are of concern to the people. So it's good for the code also. And as we have the code, maybe after some time we would like to review it, because there might be some changing circumstances. We would like to review it to ensure that it responds to those emerging challenges. And so when we visit, we get feedback. That is what will inform the review of the code.
Okay. And you wanted to add something?
I'm just saying that he's just speaking directly to his field, because you have to monitor, evaluate, and make sure that it's working correctly. But I think we'll be remiss if I don't mention this. We're not here to preach, especially to the preacher. What I mean is that when it comes to women involvement in a lot of things, if my history serves me correctly, Liberia is the first country to have a female president, which means that you already know how to get your women into certain strategic positions, as Dr. Danso have rightly mentioned. I made a little bit of research coming here, and I'm told that I'm reliably informed that the head of the Ministry of Health, Defense, Gender, Education are all headed by women.
Of course.
So that tells you that a country like Liberia is already on the path. What has been said, or what we have been discussing all along, is that our research, I just found out that there's a little bit of gap, especially in the maritime domain. And that is why the focus is there. And that's why, again, he's saying that this document that we have here has to be nationally owned.
Okay.
Because countries are already doing this. So we are not coming to tell a country what to do. It's just more like creating an awareness to say, we have noticed a challenge in this area, especially the coastal countries. And we are providing you some kind of guidelines to help make sure that we do the all inclusion, bringing women on board and giving them an opportunity to be part of the solution to the challenges that we face in the maritime domain.
And I'm sure this question will not take too long to answer, because I think I heard someone talk about training women in the security sector, but I think I heard about civilians as well. Did I hear anything about civilian women involved in the training? I just wanted to ask how you get them. How are they drawn to be a part of it?
Okay, so our approach to enhancing maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea is a very broad-based sort of approach that does not focus on only security agencies alone, because we understand, and it is true, that even coastal communities do play a critical role or have a critical role, either as contributors to maritime insecurities, but also as contributors to the solution to maritime insecurity. So I'll give you an example. When you take even piracy or armed robbery at sea into consideration, there's a sense in which in some instances, or even when it comes to transnational organized criminality, including drug trafficking and those things that use the medium of the sea, there's a sense in which sometimes the community may have an idea who may be involved,
Sure.
right? So close collaboration between, let's say, the Coast Guards or the Maritime police unit with the community through the sort of intelligence that can be provided by the community, then goes a very long way in bringing long-lasting solution to the problem. So our approach has been to broaden our, tentacle to cover both civilian police or civilian and other state-owned security agencies, and therefore we have tended to focus also on civil society organizations that have maritime security issues as a major focus in the work that we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to add to what Doc has said, let me give you an example. For instance, like what led to the development of the training for journalists in maritime security. I went to Benin to talk to the maritime prefect, shared the idea with him about we wanting to develop this training. And then he thought it was a very good idea because sometimes when an incident happens, the way the journalist will report the case impact on how the world views maybe your port. For instance, a case will happen like 70 nautical miles off the coast, and then a journalist will report insecurity at the port of, let's say, Liberia or the port of Monrovia. It paints a completely different picture of what happens. And so we need to bring the civilian, and that's why we need the civilians also, not only the security, but then the civilians also. For instance, you are here. When it comes to awareness creation, you will be able to do it, not maybe people within the security sector. And that's why we want to involve, all the stakeholders so that this problem will be comprehensively be resolved. Yes.
Maybe if I can just add a little dimension to the point made by Ben, taking the example of the journalists also as another case. There's a sense in which normally when maritime security programs are even organized, even at the level of the state and so on and so forth, because the maritime space has its own language that needs to be understood. There's a sense in which sometimes, like you said, something happens at sea, they don't even understand the technicalities or the terminologies that are associated. So normally there are instances people would even report cases bordering on armed robbery at sea as piracy, when in actual fact there's a clear distinction between piracy and armed robbery at sea. So what you realize is that there are instances where the reportage that are offered by journalists are restricted to political speeches and that sort of thing that are made, but they are not able to demonstrate technical understanding of what is really happening at sea. And we know that the contribution or the coverage that journalists give to what happened at sea is extremely critical, even for policy responses and so on and so forth. So that is one clear example in which civilians are also taken into account in terms of the support we offer.
Okay, we are out of time, but I will just take, your last words, and I will start with you, Ben, to have your final comment, then we can go across the table.
Okay, thank you very much. I will say issues of women are very important. And so not only the security, but in every aspect of the human society. And then we need to appreciate how women are affected by maybe conflict and other issues differently from how men are affected. And so what I would say is that, especially the institution within the maritime sector, they should look at this code and then look at how best they can implement this within their institutions to ensure gender equality, and then to ensure that concerns of women are taken into consideration when developing and implementing interventions within the maritime domain.
Okay, that
I would say that Liberia has taken very remarkable and very impressive, initiatives towards the involvement of women in governance, including security governance. And what this code seeks to do basically is to complement the work that is already being done. And we are hopeful that our stakeholders and colleagues, or the various institutions, including both state and non-state civil society organizations that are adopting the code, would own it and implement it and bring women to the table at every level of decision making. Thank you so much.
okay, sir. We conclude with you.
Thank you very much. I must say that our 2-day stay here has been very welcoming. The responses from the stakeholders have been very encouraging. And it is therefore my hope that the lunch tomorrow will give the opportunity for interactive sessions, better clarity, understanding of exactly what is going on. And more importantly, to also ensure that the various stakeholders will embrace the code and nationalize it, put it within context, and make it work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. He's Air Commodore David Akron, okay, a deputy commandant of the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Center. We also had as guest Dr. Kweku Danso. He's the Dean of Academic Affairs there at the center. Benjamin, I don't want to get this wrong.
Cerebral.
Benjamin Cerebral, he's a monitoring, evaluation, and learning coordinator, the Danish Maritime Security Project in the Gulf of Guinea. We also had on the sideline Aisha Nkrumah, the Senior Communications Officer at the center. And let me say, thanks for coming. Let me say, welcome again to Liberia, and wish you well in your stay here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's how we do it on this segment. Very shortly, we bring in our last